we've reached the middle portion of sun salutations, and the middle portion of the sun salutations consists of one key staple pose in yoga that's called the downward dog pose. It looks like this, and I'm sure you've seen it before, as it appears in pretty much any yoga magazine or journal. So how do we get into this pose? This pose is a very multifaceted pose. There's a lot of stuff going on in that pose. First of all, the first thing to note is that the head is located lower than the heart, which makes this pose an inversion pose, which means that you will feel the blood rushing into your head. Depending on your blood pressure and how frequently you find yourself in an inverted pose, this may feel uncomfortable and downright undoable. So this is the first thing that you have to watch, is how long can you tolerate and how long can you stand in this pose with your head facing down. So be aware of that and pace yourself appropriately. If you feel lightheaded or you can't hold it, come out of the pose into, remember, a child's pose. That's always an option. This is our rest pose. So how do we maintain this pose? This pose consists of two areas. First of all, we've got the upper body, and then we've got the lower body connecting with the mat. The first thing that people notice when doing this pose is that they cannot bring the heels down onto the floor, which is totally fine. It comes from tight hamstrings. So if your hamstrings are pretty tight and you find yourself that your heels are up in the air, don't stress over it. That's totally fine. You can even place your feet a little bit wider if you feel a bit more, if you feel some discomfort in your hips. Bending the knees and sending your sit bones up into the sky. So that's essentially the bottom part of the downward dog. The top part of the down dog consists of placing the entire surface of our palm on the mat. A lot of people tend to do this where they try to crawl the fingers into the mat, and there's a lot of space here. Not a good idea. Extra pressure on the tendons of the fingers. Try not to do that. So the entire surface of the palm right there. Hands are right on the shoulder level, and then the middle finger is in line with the shoulder. So hands are not facing sideways or inwards. The middle finger points the length of the shoulders. You can have a slight bend in your elbows, and then if your knees are bent, you can see if you can play with the rotation of your pelvis to straighten out your back. So a lot of people when they start doing this pose, they try to curve into a ball, and that's not it. So if you bend your knees, you can find through the rotation of your pelvis a V-shaped back. So this is one part of the V, and this is another part of the V. Now, this is a very uncomfortable pose if you haven't done it for a while or at all. Especially if you are a woman, the upper body will feel it right away. Men tend to have generally, on average, stronger upper body than women. So women tend to find this pose a bit taxing on the shoulders. So, and always a good idea is to drop down the knees, take a bit of a break, and then come up again. What this pose does, it strengthens the upper body, because the upper body, especially the shoulder joint, is highly mobile. We can rotate and move the arms around in all kinds of different positions, but at the expense of stability and the strength. So holding this pose for longer periods of time really creates that strength and stability in the shoulder joint, which is very, very useful. It's an absolute must these days, because a lot of us spend our time sitting in front of a keyboard and just typing things on a keyboard without really utilizing the mobility of our shoulder. Now be careful with this position. If you have any type of shoulder impingement, so if you cannot lift your arm higher than the shoulder level, this is probably not the pose for you. So when you do your sun salutations and you are aware that you have injuries in your shoulders, you can skip the downward dog pose and take a tabletop or a child's pose. So let's review this. Hands on the shoulder level, balls of the feet hip width apart or slightly wider if you have inflexible hips. Bend knees, really lengthening through the entire length of the arm, and the neck is just freely hanging down. The breathing is relaxed. And to come out of this pose, dropping the knees back to the floor, and we are out. And that's the downward dog pose for you, my friends.